There we go. Hey, what's up, buddy?
Nothing much. Give me 1 second. Let me throw you a cam because I'm gonna throw the window on stream.
How's it going?
It's pretty good to me. It's going good. Okay, I'm confused about the video.
Okay.
Um, are you like just baseline? Do you just fully accept the boys' narrative? Like, I only asked that because it just didn't seem like you were very critical of it. So I just didn't know where you were at from his perspective.
It sounds like the narrative makes sense. There were a few points in the narrative that were like corroborated by things in the video. For instance, the fact that the sister was talking about the fact that the woman came up to them and told her that she was pregnant. There's a point in the video pretty early on where you can hear the people say, "I don't care if she's pregnant, she can walk." Even though up to that point, the woman herself, I don't believe, had made a statement about her being pregnant on video yet. That sounded consistent with the idea that she probably had like tried to leverage the fact that she was pregnant for a bike. So that seemed really consistent. I also think about the part about him being a Citibike angel. That sounds pretty consistent as well. I don't know why they would know about that if he wasn't truly that thing, and if he was really regularly using the bikes and so on and so forth. That sounded realistic. I think the fact that he did have the bike for all of those times, I mean, they had receipts for that part, so that sounded like fairly consistent. Let's see. The fact that his friends and him had been using the bikes for all of that time, I mean, that also sounded consistent. So the idea that they approached her as opposed to her approaching them, even though they had all been together and had been using those bikes for quite some time, also sounded consistent. They said you have music on your stream. Anyway, yeah, my secondary camera is boo boo. But anyway, so all of those things sounded very consistent to me. So in my opinion, it sounded like most of the parts of the story seem consistent. There are probably some subjective things that I can't think of right now that might not be like I might not be able to know one way or the other. But I think for all of the substantive things, it all sounded pretty consistent to me. Sure.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I've got a few issues with the video, but do you still stand by the idea that because she only had the bike for a minute, that it was clear that she just gave up on the bike and then just went to another one?
No.
I only asked this because one of the narratives from the lawyer. This is from the first video, not the second one.
Okay. Oh no, I corrected that in the second one, obviously.
Okay.
Like as I said, I was wrong because originally I thought, oh, this must have been a case of just two people that were mistaken and so on and so forth with the analogy that I had given. And then I think once the boy came out with his story and then we started seeing and being able to piece all those things together, then it became more consistent with, oh, no. It wasn't a matter of her just like walking away and him claiming and whatever on bike. It was more about the fact that she was trying to take this bike from the 17-year-old boy, as I said in the second video.
Okay, yeah. Why do you think that she was trying to take the bike from the boys, independent of the boy's story? Because in the boy's story, he talks about, I mean, both sides talk about there being other bikes at the dock. He does talk about the highly coveted new bike, but to me, that doesn't really matter much. Like it's, I just don't care about that aspect. But
Wait, why
there's
don't
other
you
bikes
care?
at the dock. Basically, I think if he is griefing the bike in the sense that they're riding around for 45 minutes, they're stopping at a docking station, and the reason they're stopping is to not have that extra charge. They are accepting the risk that by docking the bike, somebody else is going to rent it. That's a possibility.
I don't think so. I think it's pretty realistic to assume that if I'm at a docking station and I go to dock a bike that I've been riding and I stand directly next to the bike with my hands on the handlebar or continue sitting on the bike as I dock it and then just wait the 2 minutes and then go and take the bike back out, I would imagine that sounds like, I think that's a reasonable thing that someone can do. Furthermore, I want to point out that by the time that Citibike Karen ended up renting out the bike, that 2-minute lockout period had already been gone. If I can look at the receipts really quickly, let me see. I can tell you exactly what time he had finished his second ride, and I believe, and then her.
What do you mean a 2-minute lockout period?
After you dock a Citibike, when you lock it in, like I think someone said, I think they said it's 1 to 2 minutes that you cannot like rent another bike after you like first lock it in. And then I guess like the system is registering that you ended the ride, and then afterwards then you can rent the bike again. And I
wonder if that's only for maybe you would know. Is that so? If I'm either the boy or the Karen, I ride a bike, I drop it off at a docking station. I personally have a 2-minute lockout session where I can't ride another bike because I just checked one in, and the system has to process that transaction is overwards. If it's possible for somebody else to come take that bike in that 2-minute period, because if that's the case, that would explain why in the video we see that the Karen has the bike because the light's on, it goes off, and the light comes back on because it is now the boy's bike.
Sure, that did happen in the video. So just to be clear, the receipt that I was looking for, I can share it with you really quickly. Let me just send it to you in a DM.
Okay.
Here, let me. Third ride, PNG. Boom. So in that picture right there, you can see that the boy had the bike from 6:33 to 7:19. Citibike Karen didn't get the bike until 7:24. So it was well past the lockout period. So if at that point that boy has that bike and has his hands on the bike, then it's his to check out, as more so than it would be hers if he's at the bike first. Like for example,
even though he doesn't have it checked out, just by virtue of if we're accepting.
Yeah. Like for example, let me ask you this. It's like let's say you and I both walk up to a Citibike, and I just get to the bike before you. Right? Like we were both intending to rent a bike, and both of us are walking towards the bike, and I get to the bike before you and physically sit down on the bike and get ready to scan it. If you were to rush past me or rush, like I'm looking for my pockets to find out where my phone is so that I can go scan it. Now, if you already had the app ready, or maybe I have my phone, but I'm like trying to load the app on my phone. You know, it's taking me a while because maybe, I don't know, my phone is kind of freezing up a little bit. Do you think it would be proper etiquette for you to be able to just, like, since you already have the app open, to just reach and scan the QR code on the bike and say, I'm sorry, you didn't get it in time?
Like if you're already on it?
Sure.
Yeah. No, it wouldn't be proper etiquette.
Okay, what if I wasn't sitting on the bike, but I was holding the bike in my hands? And do you feel like it would be proper etiquette then?
No, it wouldn't be proper etiquette.
So
but I'd want to know if
you would say no.
Well, the determining factor. I mean, if you're on the bike, no, I would say it would be improper of me to go and scan it while you're on it. But this is also why I have a problem with the boy's story, is because he talks about, again, at the docking station, there's other bikes, but they're all supposedly on their bikes. And the boy even says, I think we're calling him Michael, right? He says he's not actually on the bike, but that he's got his arm across the handlebars. So he's standing by it, whatever, according to him, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I find it far-fetched that any person, not just if they're a lady or pregnant or white or whatever, like I don't care about the identity stuff necessarily for this part, which is, she goes up to him, asks him if she can use that bike, and then goes to another friend, asks to use the bike, and then goes back to his bike and then takes it anyways. I find that a far-fetched thing to assume to be correct or like truthful, because there's other bikes at the station. It seems like she's necessarily putting herself in a confrontational situation, and like where there's like 5 men.
But she wanted an e-bike. The other bikes weren't e-bikes. 20% of the bikes at Citibike are e-bikes. The other 80%...
can you explain to me the difference between an e-bike and a non-e-bike? I don't know.
The e-bike is an electronic bike, whereas the other bikes are just manual bikes. And so only 20% of the bikes at Citibike are electronic. E-bikes are relatively new. And so those bikes are much more preferred, obviously, because you don't have to work as hard and so on and so forth. And so that was the bike that he was looking for. According to the boy's story, he walked around 20 minutes looking for that bike before he was able to get it. And I believe the first time he got the bike was at 5:53. So I could imagine if it's a pretty coveted bike and it's something that I value and I know that I'm going to be riding e-bikes with my friend like all day, then I would imagine that that would be a bike that I would probably hold on to as soon as I find it and try to use it as frequently as I can throughout that day. Also, if I'm using that bike to go from one borough, the Bronx, Brooklyn, all the way to the Bronx or wherever the freak. So if I'm like leaving, like and traveling pretty long distances on this e-bike, then I would imagine I want to use that same bike to get back home, so that like because it's the easier bike. I don't want to travel really far on an electronic bike and then have to pedal all the way back on a manual bike. So I could imagine that he probably intended to keep that bike for all of that time, and he did, because he then continued to use the bike. I think his final ride for the bike ended at 8:41. If you need me to send you that receipt because he posted it, I can.
When did that ride start?
The one that ended at 8:41?
Yeah.
7:59. Here, I'll send it to you.
And the confrontation is at 7:24.
Mm-hmm.
He re-obtains the bike through the renting service at 7:25. So he's holding onto the bike for what, 30 minutes?
So just sorry.
Like he's essentially griefing.
Okay, I'm sorry. Wait. What do you mean? He's griefing?
Okay.
What do you mean? That was the first receipt. I'm sorry, I sent it to the wrong person.
Oh, okay. You're fine.
And then the fifth bike, the other one, the final ride that he did is here. I'll send that to you right now as well. Yeah, so this fifth one, as you can see, was from 7:59 to 8:41.
Okay.
And then I think the fourth ride, which I also have here if you need it, that one was from 6:33 to 7:19. No, that's the third ride, isn't it?
Yeah. Technically, the fourth ride is during the confrontation. It's when he checks it in, and it's only for the minute or whatever.
No,
you
that's
can
hers.
see. It's like 5 minutes. No, it's 5 minutes, 6
yeah.
minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that was from
and you can see the bike doesn't move.
25 to 7:31. To say that the bike didn't move, I don't know that you can confirm that, right? Because like obviously he could easily have like traveled just a short distance and came right back. Like the proof
if you look at the if you pull up the 7:25 to 7:31 receipt, I'm pretty sure you can see that the bike stays in the same spot, and it's also in that spot when this fifth ride happens.
I think you're misunderstanding the way this thing works. This isn't like a GPS tracker that's like detailing all of the places you traveled on the bike. It's only specifically talking about where you checked out the bike and where you
right, exactly.
So
yeah, I understand that.
So then if that's the case, then that just simply saying that, hey, this shows that he both received and docked the bike at the same location is not indicative of the fact that he didn't actually use the bike, travel anywhere on the bike. It just means that he checked it out and docked it in the same place.
Can you think of any reason he would only be checking out the bike for 6 minutes where he would go to come back?
Sure, maybe there's like a little quick Subway up the street. He goes into Subway or a McDonald's, drives to the McDonald's, grabs something, or a liquor store, drives to the liquor store, grabs a drink, comes right back, and then is charging it. I mean, there's a billion different reasons I could probably come up with off the top of my head for why you would use a bike for a very short amount of time. Like when I rode bikes with my friends, it wasn't always like some very lengthy excursion of some sort. There are plenty of times where you just ride a bike and you decide, hey, I'm grabbing my bike and I'm gonna go somewhere really quick and come right back.
If it were my opinion, I think that these kids are being entitled, and I understand they're kids. But the reason being is that the whole confrontation, it takes place at like 7:23, 7:24, whatever. My problem is that he's done with the bike on the third trip at, let me pull up the DMs real quick, 7:19. Okay. The confrontation happens at 7:24, 7:25, and then his fourth ride ends at 7:31, and then he's got the bike for a whole 25 minutes after that. From the third trip to the fifth trip, that is 40 minutes. So he's sitting there at the same location with the bike.
Wait, 7:31 to 7:59? That's only 28 minutes.
From 7:19 to 7:59.
It sounds like you're saying that and you're ignoring the very thing that we just went through about the 6-minute trip that we have a receipt for from 7:25 to 7:31. Why would you not count from 7:31 to 7:49 as opposed to 7:19 to 7:49?
Well, I mean, 6 minutes out of 40 minutes, even if that was the case, it just feels like I can't think of a single place he would go where he couldn't use the
Here, I'll
not.
help you. I'll
So
help
I well, just
like
let me.
pizza. I already gave you these places. Like he went to the local pizza shop, picked up a $5 slice of pizza, as is common in New York, or he drove like to the local halal cart and went and got himself some halal and then came back to the station.
I'm not
There's a billion
denying.
different places that he could go.
I'm
What do
not
you mean?
denying. I'm not denying there's possibilities for things he can do in 6 minutes. I'm just saying none of that seems like it necessitates him taking the bike at the same time that Karen takes the bike. And I frankly, I just don't believe that they were actually by the bike. They were probably in eye shot because the story doesn't add up. I don't see a woman who is if we're saying she's invoking white woman tears, which I can understand the argument for that, like she's intentionally inserting herself in what would perceivably be a dangerous situation, meaning nothing about the race, but just her being surrounded by like 5 men, as
Five
opposed
boys.
to
They were
going.
children, boys.
Well,
They were young
okay,
boys.
yeah, fair. I mean, well, we know the one was a boy. I don't know how old any of the other people were,
You could look
but
at the other one, now, dude. He looked pretty young as well. They look to be around the
yeah,
same
yeah.
age.
I
These
mean,
are all friends.
I assume if one of them's 17, like yes,
Yeah, they're all
at
young
least a
children.
couple of the other.
Yeah.
Well, they're not children in the sense that they can't like make honest to God like good or bad decisions.
Sure, but they're not adults, so they're children.
Sure. But it just seems like they're griefing the bike for the purposes of keeping it there because they want to take it home, like you said. But there's no reason to actually stop her from taking that bike. If he's only checking it out, if he is only checking it out because she's checking it out, mind you, part of the story was that she checks out the bike, they push it back in, and then we can see in the video, mind you, your argument was that if he's on the bike, if his hands are over the handlebars, would it be proper etiquette for somebody to run by and just scan the QR code so that way they can technically rent the bike out? That's what he did as a response to her.
Sick, I'm so sorry, but it sounds like everything right now that you keep like jumping and saying things, but you're not finishing sentences, so I don't know. Like it's like at one point you're saying like, well, I don't know. It was too much. There was like all of these fractions of
Okay,
of sentences. Can you
let me just
restate
keep
a
it
little
to
bit?
the etiquette. Yeah. Okay. Let me just pivot to the etiquette argument. Your argument was that it would be rude for somebody to cut ahead of you to scan that QR code if their hands are on the bike. They're already on the bike. You're just like being a jackass at that point.
Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay.
But that's also what the boy did to her.
No.
She was on the bike. Her hands were on the bike when he scanned his
Okay. Oh, sure. Okay, so let's ask this really quick. If in that situation that you already admitted would be bad etiquette, for example, I'm sitting on the bike, someone goes and scans the QR code, or I'm not sitting on the bike. Again, I have my hands on the bike, and while I'm like getting ready to scan it or whatever reason, I have my hands on the bike. Someone goes up and scans the QR code using their phone to claim the bike that I clearly had my hands on. That would be bad etiquette. I think in response to a person doing that bad etiquette thing, for me to push the bike into the dock to end their ride so that I can then check the bike back out into my name, I think that would be very reasonable. Do you think that would not be reasonable?
No, I think it is wrong to me when I picture that scenario. That's a detainment. That's you having the right to take out something that you have legally rented, and somebody saying, "Nope, it's not your turn. I'm pushing this bike back in." Now, obviously, I'm using a forceful motion, but either way, that's her right to use that bike.
But you said it was bad etiquette.
I don't agree that he was standing by the bike.
No, hold on. It was a hypothetical. I gave you that. I'm sorry. You don't get a chance to not agree on it because it was something that I gave you in a hypothetical. So given that a person is holding on to a bike and they're getting ready and they intend to scan that bike, if a person, while this person has possession of said bike, was to go up and scan that bike that the other person had in their possession, you said that would be bad etiquette. In the case in which a person did that, do you feel like the original person who had their hands on the bike, pushing the bike back into the dock to lock it, and in that person who did the bad etiquette, would you feel that is bad etiquette of that person to do that? Would you feel that it's wrong of them to do that?
One, I would agree. Yes, it's bad etiquette for the person coming up to scan the QR code. I would say it's also wrong for the person to push in the bike.
Okay, so
Because essentially we're creating a scenario where we're just choosing to escalate every single time. We're like escalating the confrontation.
I feel that, but here's what I believe. I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I don't think it's necessarily an escalation. I think that this is just like the accurate response because I'm claiming what's rightfully mine. If I'm sitting here, for example, I've seen these kind of situations. We see them on like a Black Friday. I remember there was an incident where these people were grabbing televisions and like they were like, for a Black Friday. And a woman walks up and snatches the television from a 5-year-old boy's hand. Not a television, it was some device. She snatched it from the 5-year-old boy's hand. Obviously, that's inappropriate. Now, it sounds to me like you would say it is then inappropriate for the mother to then snatch the object back from the woman who snatched it from her child's hand. Would you feel that that is wrong for her to do?
Yes, still. Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's okay. Then at least now I understand where our disagreement is. For me, I'm always going to say that I think it becomes a defensive action. If somebody does something aggressively that is bad etiquette and immoral, I think it is a defensive action for me to end their ride to reclaim what was rightfully mine according to etiquette and decency. And if you don't feel that it's defensive, you feel that it's escalatory and therefore problematic, I mean, that's your opinion and you're entitled to it. We just disagree.
Okay. Yeah. I just want to say, okay, if we're creating another hypothetical scenario, because we can't. I mean, well, the kids kind of admit to it, or the kid kind of admits to it, which is, I think it's improper etiquette for the person to come and scan the QR code because the original example you gave was like two people wanting to use the bike. But if he's just standing by the bike to like pseudo reserve it, well, really all he's doing is standing by the bike so that way other people can't use it, and then bypassing the fact that really he should be having it rented out right now. He just doesn't want to pay the extra fee. And in doing so, he's preventing other people from using the service that's supposed to be available to the entire city. And essentially, like, this is why I'm calling it griefing, is because if they're standing by the bikes or sitting on the bikes to keep other people from using it, well, it's docked. That's not their property. It's not for them to choose when people are allowed to come and rent these things.
Sure. So I guess because the rides were free for him, I guess maybe instead he could have just taken the bike out and taken the bike back out and just like had it sitting there like on his membership from, I guess the time would have been 7:15 to 7:24 to 7:31 when he intended to leave. He could have just done that, I guess, and then it would have been fine. Yeah, I guess he could have just done that. But I think also there might be a charging that might be somewhat necessary for these bikes. So maybe he was trying to have the bike charge. Because in fact, in the video, there's a point in time when the guy, Nadu, the other guy, he gets up and he says...
The one holding the camera or the one that's sitting on the bike next to him?
The one that's sitting to the bike on our right, his left.
Yeah.
And that person says, well, hey, he offers her that bike. And the guy holding the camera tells him no. And Nadu says, there's no charge anyway. So it sounds like there might be a charge necessary on that bike, and maybe that's why they were sitting at the station, because one of them was charging the bike. And so while it was charging, it's like, okay, good, we'll all wait here together while you charge your bike really quickly, and then we'll go ahead and head on off. That sounds like a probable or a reasonable thing too. And because I'm deciding to let a bike charge, someone decides to say, by the way, I want that bike. And it's like, no, this is the bike that I'm intending to use, but I'm charging it. I don't understand how you could claim the bike in that situation. But again, you're entitled to think that you can, but I don't think it's griefing, and I don't think it's inappropriate. I don't think it's bad etiquette, and I think it's absolutely immoral for that person, Citibike Karen, to go over there and scan the bike.
Immoral's pretty strong. I mean, come on.
If it's bad etiquette, I don't know how it wouldn't be immoral.
It's because etiquette is just like a set of rules that we agree to. It's not necessarily, there's no moral weight behind it. It's just saying like, yeah, we're going to operate in a specified way to like make sure everybody gets along. That doesn't mean like if you break the etiquette, what you're doing is necessarily bad. Okay. Well, I mean, we would just disagree with that.
Absolutely.
Disagree there.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think scanning something that somebody else has possession of or is intending to use that has already claimed it, that it got arrived at it first, I think that that's an immoral thing to do. And it's indecent for society, and it would lead to conflicts like the one that we just saw. And I think that's a pretty bad thing. So, yeah, I'm going to say immoral. I think etiquette is based on morality.
What do you think about the 5-on-1 scenario where everybody's hounding her all at the same time? Do you think that her reaction was at least reasonable? Because to me, like, I could understand her having a confrontation with the specific guy if we're going with your idea that it's okay for them to just stand by the bikes and wait to use it, for, let's say, for the purposes of charging it. I don't know that I would ever agree that it's okay for 5 people to hound her all at the same time and expect her to have like a non-instinct based reaction.
Well, I feel like it really started off with them being particularly calm. At the very beginning, they were saying to her very calmly, hey, it's not your bike. They said that very, very calmly. She was screaming for help at the time. I have the video. If you would like me to, I can play it for you.
Yeah, I just don't think they were actually acting that calm. I think even if the one boy,
I don't care about what you think. We have the video. If you want me to, I can play it for you so you can see with a fact they were saying to her rather calmly, it's not your bike, as she was screaming for help at the top of her lungs at the very beginning of the video. If you like, I can play it for you if that's what's necessary, because that did happen. It's not just my opinion. Would you like me to play?
I mean, yeah, you can play it. I'm not going to stop you. I don't think that they were being quite calm at all. I mean, at some point later on in the video, which is only a minute and a half, they said her baby's going to come out retarded, and we're sitting there like making fun of her. And
I'm sorry, you're moving the goalposts, because I didn't say that they stayed calm the entire time. What I said was that they began calmly talking to her at the very beginning of the video, saying to her, this isn't your bike, while she was screaming help at the top of her lungs at the beginning of the video. Talking about what happens at the end of the video doesn't in any way, shape, or form invalidate what I'm saying about the beginning of the video. The beginning of the video, they were calmly talking to her as she screamed at the top of her lungs. If things became escalatory at that point, especially given the fact that she's screaming for help as if she's in danger, accusing them of hurting their fetus, all of those types of things to people who are calmly telling her this is not your bike, when she's the one that scanned the bike that he was holding, I think that it's completely fair for them to become heightened in their senses at this point, understanding the danger that they're in if police or other people get involved. And I could see them all wanting to respond in the way that they did, and I don't think there was anything inappropriate about it. But here, let me play this video for you really quickly.
Yeah, bring it up so that way we can
would be this right here. Okay, let me know when you're in there.
Yeah, just give me a second. Throwing it on stream.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Go, record him.
You can barely hear him. You hear him say, this is not your bike? One more time.
Go, record him.
Help me! Please help me!
This is not your bike.
Please help me!
This is not your bike.
Please help me!
While she's doing that, you can even hear one of them laughing in the background. You can hear him like chuckling as he's saying it. They're all saying this is not your bike, rather calmly, while she's screaming for help. So then after she escalated the situation in which these young black men recognize that there's high potential for danger if authorities or other people get involved, I can see them at this point wanting to all dogpile at that point. But the fact of the matter is, none of them harmed her, none of them assaulted her, none of them did anything that was ridiculous besides saying things to her like your baby's going to come out retarded, but that's also in response to her lying and accusing him of hurting her fetus and harming her unborn child. Trying to lie and say that they stole the bike. So I can see her escalating things, and then him simply levying that insult doesn't seem so problematic to me.
I'll be honest, the only reason it seems like they're calm here is because they have control of the situation, meaning they know they're not gonna they don't have to worry about letting her leave with that bike.
Okay, sure, maybe. But the fact of the matter was, they were calmly explaining things while she was yelling help at the top of her lung for a bike that she stole. So if that's the case, I just refuse to I refuse to accept the notion that they are somehow in the wrong for dogpiling her as if she wasn't the aggressor in this situation.
I mean, I actually don't think she's the aggressor at all. I think if given any other scenario, if it were, I don't see a scenario where it's not reasonable for a woman to feel like if 5 guys are approaching her, they're all around her, they're not letting her leave.
Them.
We don't actually know that.
Well, according to his story, that they do, and it sounds reasonable considering the fact that all of them had been using these bikes for all of this time, and they had been using it consistently and using it for a total of 3 hours, for over 3 hours, and this was halfway through that 3-hour period. Then I think it's probably we're pretty safe to assume that if they recognize that the electronic city bikes are pretty coveted, then it sounds realistic to think that they would stay near those bikes while they're at the dock station so that they can continue to claim those bikes together, as opposed to giving them up to other people, especially if they walk around 20 minutes at the beginning of the day. So then the idea that they weren't by the bike at that point doesn't sound realistic. It sounds like reasonably she approached them, not to mention the fact that she admitted that she had just ended her shift. So if anybody changed location during this time, it would have been her. And since they already had a history with the bike on that day, dating back over an hour and a half, then it sounds reasonable that they would have been by the bike at that time, and that she was the newcomer coming into that situation, approaching those young men. That sounds reasonable to me.
Well, I mean, for sure, 100%. Neither one of us could deny that she's the newcomer coming to the situation. But I'm saying I don't think it's reasonable to just assume that they were by the bikes. I think it's reasonable to say they were probably within eyeshot. There's a fence right there. Very well, the one kid who is on the bike right now could have been actually not standing by the bike. But I mean, the problem that I have here is like, no, I can't think of a scenario where a woman surrounded by 5 men wouldn't feel threatened in that scenario. And I think given most social scenarios, we would say like, yes, even if they're not doing anything physical to her, their presence can be a threat.
So if their presence is a threat, she shouldn't have put herself in that situation by asking them for the bike. But it's okay. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, listen.
This is why I'm disagreeing with this is why I think it's kind of ridiculous to me, the one part in the story where she's like asking both boys to use the bikes, and then they say no, and then she still goes and uses the bikes. It's because it seems like
there.
It seems like opposite of like instinct for what a person would do if they're in a scenario where potentially they could be surrounded by 5 men.
I hear you. So it sounds like entitlement to me, which I'm pretty sure most of us have encountered at some point in our lives, where we've seen someone believe that they are entitled to things. Again, the Black Friday situations, we see these kind of things happen all the time. We see people cutting in line in different situations. We experience it when we're driving. The idea that people have enough awareness not to feel entitled to different things, that I can imagine her thinking because of my pregnancy that these kids are likely to give me one of the bike, chivalry and all of that kind of stuff. And I could see her trying to use that, leverage that as something that would grant her this bike, and I can see her being frustrated that it didn't happen, and then feeling entitled to the bike anyway and scanning it. I can see that. If you're,
it would only be,
you can't see that at all, then I think that's cool. But I don't really think that there's any place to go. What we do have is, again, as I laid out the facts, 5 receipts from the boy, an hour and a half of bike usage prior to Citibike Karen's encounter, a continued hour and a half bike usage afterwards. So the fact of the matter was the boys are part of Citibike Angels, a program for people who are frequent bike riders and transport bikes to different places that give him like bonus rides. He uses it regularly. Like, they have receipts for that stuff too. So if all of these things are true, then I think the idea that he wouldn't recognize that because these bikes are so particularly coveted that he needs to stand by the bike in order to make sure that someone doesn't take the bike sounds very reasonable to me. If he was able to procure these very coveted bikes for about 4 hours or 3.5 hours on a given day, then it sounds to me like he understands what's necessary in order for him to keep the bike. So I think the idea that he stepped away just does not sound founded at all, and there's no evidence that he did so whatsoever. So I'm just going to go ahead and take him at his word here, given all of that other stuff.
Okay, so I think you could, I mean, if that specific snippet of his story about the asking permission and shit, yes, I could see the argument for her being entitled. I would also say it's entitlement on their part to think that just because they take a bike to a station and dock it, that even if it's because it's charging or whatever, that if they're waiting there, sitting on the bikes or standing by it, holding the handlebars, whatever, it's entitlement on their end to think that because they drove it there or rode it there, that they have the right to ride away with it too. I mean, the whole point of the Citibike Angels anyways is they get rewards because the whole point is that you take bikes and fill up empty stations or move them around. You're not, it's not, the reward system isn't supposed to be there so that way you just ride the bikes all day. It's to make sure that the bikes are actually being distributed throughout the city and there's not 1 or 2 docking stations that are being left empty because everybody's like using the bikes to get away from a place more often than they are going to it.
Okay, well, I think we do have something we agree about. You're right. There is entitlement. There's an entitlement to use the commodity that you rent out. Just like at a library. If I rent out a book, that book is mine for that 7 days. And if at the end of my 7 days I decide I want to rent the book back out, I can go right back to that library and then just re-rent the book out. And I can go to the librarian and say, hey, I'd like to check this back in and extend my whatever, and they'll check it back in and re-rent it out to me for another 7 days. I am entitled to it, rightfully entitled to it. I can end it early and say, hey, listen, I'm not going to be in town on Monday, and I know that I'm supposed to turn this book in by Sunday, so I would like to turn this book in. I know I'm supposed to turn the book in on Tuesday, but I'm going out of town for a week. So here, this Sunday, I'd like to turn this book in, and so I can rent it for another week, so I can end my lease of the book early in order to extend it. You can do whatever the freak you want to, but typically the first person to come into contact with the thing does have an entitlement. So I agree, there is an entitlement, a rightful entitlement that's afforded to the person who checked the bike out first. And I think that's always the way we use it. The user who used the thing, who checked it out last, is the authorized user. Now, if somebody violates etiquette in order to get that authorized user status, we're not going to recognize that. And that's what Citibike Karen did in this situation. So yes, I think the boy was entitled. So I think we agree there. For him finding the book way early, let me just look at the time really quick one more time. For him to find the book,
I know it's all over the place.
Yeah, for him to find the bike at 5:53 p.m., I think he was entitled to it, and he did maintain the control of that bike for all of those hours, with his final ride ending at what was the time again? Let me find that. At 8:41 p.m. I don't know. I think, yeah, it sounds about right that yes, he was entitled to the bike, and it's crazy that she thought that she some sort of way could usurp his entitlement by scanning the bike while he still had access to it. I think it's disgusting behavior, and I think screaming for help when no one is assaulting you, no one is physically touching you, I think despite the fact that you're usurping his entitlement and in full-on Karen behavior, I think it was a gross thing for her to do. I think she knows the risk that she put them at, and I hope that she loses her job.
Okay. I think the job situation is absolutely crazy for anybody who says it, you included. Like, I don't think that is a proper response. But okay, so we can get back to the library analogy, but I would say that, in my opinion, I don't know if you would agree with this, but it's a detainment for her to check out the bike and them to push it back in.
I think if somebody checked out something that was rightfully mine, then I can say, then yes, you can call it a detainment. I'm fairly certain that there would be no legal ramifications for me claiming the thing that was actively mine in my hand that a person tried to steal from me, though I was the authorized user, considering the fact that I got to the bike first and I was about to use it. I think if any detainment that you would be talking about would be probably in response to her bad etiquette, so I'm not going to charge them in that situation. I'm going to charge her for the bad etiquette that she shouldn't have done in the first place by scanning the bike that he had access to.
I mean, okay, I get the etiquette rules. The problem with etiquette is it's essentially house rules, and if I'm not from your house, I might not have the same standard for etiquette. But
nobody has the standard that the first person to come into contact with something generally has the dibs on that thing. No one doesn't have that etiquette, especially who doesn't?
That's the problem, is dibs. That's the entire problem, because one of the things that's being invoked is the Citibike Angels, but the point is not to take bikes around for 4 hours. It's to say, hey, we understand that there's going to be a problem with bikes populating in specific areas. You're a part of this group because you understand the need to have bikes at different stations, and it sounds he's less committed to the actual mission of the group and more just using it for the rewards, because all he's doing is taking the same bikes that are sought after.
You don't know that he does it on a regular basis. He'd obviously.
Well, he said in the story he does it on a regular basis.
But he said in the story he does what?
that he it's said inside the News One article that they regularly take the bikes out for hours and hours every day. Well, not every day, but it's
Sure.
like a regular occurrence.
And
So yes, I do know that.
Okay, I'm sorry. And you're saying that that's a violation of Citibike's policy of some sorts? Or you're
No,
saying
I'm
that
saying
that's not part of Citibike Angels things. It almost sounds like the ridiculousness. It almost sounds like you're implying that because he uses the bike regularly, that he can't sometimes on his free time or when he chooses to do Citibike Angels activity. It'd be the equivalent of somebody saying, "Hey, I donate some of my money to charity," but then you say, "But you're also consuming a lot on whatever the freak your interest is." It's like, sure. So he uses the bike regularly because he likes to enjoy them, but he also sometimes does Citibike Angel activities and relocates bikes, to make sure that they're going to full stations. So I would say probably, these things are not incompatible. Where the only reason why I invoked the idea that he was part of Citibike Angel was to elucidate the fact that he was very familiar with the bike policies, very familiar with bike etiquette, as he had been doing these things for a very long time. So the idea that he stepped away from a bike that he knew was highly coveted sounded unlikely to me. Just to discredit.
Well, I mean,
that's why.
The real reason you invoke Citibike Angels, and this is not like I'm just saying he invokes it. So
Yes.
The reason why I'm holding him to that standard is because he invokes it not just as saying like, well, I know the etiquette for these bikes, but I use them all the time. And part of the mission of the Citibike Angels is to have these bikes distributed. If you're taking a bike all the way around city and reserving it for the sake of yourself feeling entitled to it, you're not really like fulfilling the mission of the bike. So, of the group.
Not every day has to be dedicated towards Citibike Angels. I'm sorry that went over your head. Let's try it one more time. On some days, he's doing the Citibike Angels program and relocating bikes for himself. At other times, he's just using the bike for his own leisure. If this is a day where he's not doing the Citibike Angels program, but instead just intended to use the bike for an all-day excursion with his friends, he's entitled to doing that. And that does not mean that he's invalidating his Citibike Angels activities. It does not mean that he's violating Citibike's policy, any of those things. So yes.
So he's just entitled.
In this specific instance, as I said earlier, I'm sorry if you missed that again, yes, he is entitled to the bike given that he found it first and that he used it and he checked it out and he kept it within his possession. I would say he is entitled, rightfully entitled to it. Who is not entitled was Citibike Karen, who scanned the bike while the young boy had it in his possession. Sure, she's not entitled to a bike because she's pregnant. She's not entitled to a bike because she worked a 12-hour shift. She's not entitled to the bike because she's a public servant, as someone tried to invoke earlier. She's not entitled to the bike because she asked for it or because she's a female or any of those things. You're entitled to the bike when you get to the bike first and when you check it out first. She did not get to the bike first. Obviously, that boy got to that bike over an hour before that incident.
Well,
it's first come, first serve.
Yes, and weirdly enough, when the bike was docked, she was the first one to scan it, so she got to it first, and then he pushed it back in.
But we've already contended that it's likely that he had the bike in his possession when she scanned it, according to his story. So simply saying she scanned it first is willfully ignorant of the fact that she scanned a bike that was in someone else's possession.
Okay, let me ask you a question then. How long would he have to stand by that bike for it to be wrong for him to hold on to that bike for him to go for another ride? Because it seems like you're okay with his entitlement, you're not okay with her entitlement. And to me, the only real answer is that I don't care if I only care about the bad etiquette for scanning the QR code if you're holding on the bike for the purposes of like you're holding on to it because you're about to leave with it.
Okay, so then let me ask you, what is that time period? So let's say I show up, I rent a bike, and I plan on going a distance that takes about an hour and a half, but you obviously understand, I'm hoping you understand this already, that the bikes, you're only allowed 45 minutes, and after 45 minutes, you're now charged $4 every 15 minutes for the bikes.
I think it's somebody posted
it's $4
actual
every 15 minutes.
I don't know that that's actually the case.
I looked it up. Do you want me to find you a picture of it?
Yeah, please.
All right, let me see.
But anyways, you were saying there was a 2-minute lockout. I would say 3 minutes.
No. Okay, so you would say that if a person grabbed a bike and they intended to use it for an hour and a half trip, you're saying after 45 minutes they dock the bike. You're saying that they have to check the bike back out within 3 minutes, or else at that point that's bad etiquette?
Yes, because at that point, like, they know why they're stopping the bike. It's to circumvent the additional charges because they're a member. They get a 45-minute trip free. They're docking it for the purposes of being able to keep riding it around. So if they're sitting there and letting it sit at that station for an extended period of time, presumably you would only be sitting there to for the lockout reason.
So let me ask you this. What if it's this? What if it's me and a friend and we're going together and we're renting these bikes and we're intending to travel a distance that's an hour and a half away? We get 45 minutes, but his bike is low and he realizes that his bike will not endure the next 45 minutes. So he's charging his bike and I'm standing next to him while he's charging his bike and I'm charging my bike as well. Even though my bike probably could make the 45-minute distance, I want to make sure that, you know, while he's charging, I might as well charge as well because I have nothing else to do. So I'm sitting here at the bike while it's in the docking station. What's the etiquette there? Would you say that I only have 3 minutes?
Yes, I can explain why too, because I know there's going to be another docking station before the 45-minute situation. So even if that means you've got to physically bike to the, and by the way, you said 20% of the bikes in New York City were e-bikes. So if that's the case, the likelihood of finding one, it's not actually that hard. It's just hard to find the newest model of e-bike, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what he said.
It
wasn't the fact that yeah, but that's what I'm saying is like that entitlement is actually wrong. Yes.
Okay. Well, look, hey, listen, I appreciate the conversation. At this point, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think that there's anything wrong about it. I think any reasonable person can say that if a person is using a bike with their friend to tell them, yes, you wait while he charges his bike, then you drive a little bit and then you stop and charge your bike, as opposed to simultaneously charging your bikes together to go the next leg of whatever trip you plan to do. I think it's reasonable to be able to say, I'm still holding on to this bike that I'm using with my friend while he charges his thing. I think everyone thinks that's reasonable. Anyone not saying that that's reasonable is absolutely ridiculous. But then there comes a question of etiquette, which is why it probably would go first come, first serve. If I have the bike, then it's my bike, and you can't check out the bike while I have the bike. And we wouldn't run into this problem with people having entitlement and scanning bikes that are in other people's possession. It's crazy that we got to do mental gymnastics in order to pretend that there's no way a woman would do this. There's no way a woman would feel entitled in this scenario, right? Versus a 17-year-old boy. There's no way that that would happen. So that way we can just completely dismiss his story. As obviously noted, the kid had the bike for hours and hours and hours, and he was a frequent user. He has 5 receipts for this same bike, so he was using this bike. He did intend to use this bike. He told her that he intended to get back home. He had driven a very far distance on the bike, so all of that sounds like he understood what was needed in order to claim the bike, and this woman felt entitled and came over there and weaponized her tears, falsely accused him of hurting her fetus, lied and screamed help at the absolute top of her lungs, completely fabricated tears that didn't actually fall in order to try to make some sort of accusation. All of these things happen. I think she's a freaking sick, disgusting person, and I hope she loses her job. You can get the last word, buddy.
No, I was just gonna say you brought up the tears. I just wanted to ask, do you still think she was weaponizing her race? Like, do you think for her it's still like a race thing?
I didn't say she weaponized her race. What I said was she weaponized her tears.
Well, I mean, to me that just sounds like you were invoking like the white woman tears meme.
It doesn't have to be a white woman. It could be anyone in tears. People tend to focus on when women begin to cry, people tend to get very sympathetic. But particularly white women, sure. But it doesn't matter. She fabricated those tears. That's what I was talking about.
Okay. Do you think race for you was like an important element in this to make these judgments?
No, not at all. Like if all of the people were of the same race, I would have the same take. I think there are additional elements that I think sure might have been there because of race. For example, we all have to understand the idea that if the authorities got involved, if the police got involved, that the reaction is not going to be identical if it's 5 young black boys versus 5 young white boys. We've seen these things in like Google searches, right? Where like if you say 5 black teens or 3 black teens, it shows 3 black what do you call it, mug shots of teenagers, whereas if you do three
Yeah.
white teens, it does stock photos, right? So we all understand the implicit biases that impact these situations in this white supremacist country. So the idea that this white woman was saying that it was calling for help with these 4 or 5 black boys surrounding, or it was only 4, I believe, with these 4 young black men being there in that situation, we all understand. And we can tell by the fact that the white man immediately came up to her and immediately was like, hey, why don't you, and he said, no, the bike is on my account, and he was immediately saying, hey, why don't you reset that? And one last thing, actually.
Okay.
You tell me right now, what was the thing that made her grab his phone? Was that entitlement?
No, I actually, okay, I will agree that grabbing his phone was completely out of place, but I think she had an instinctual reaction because she felt like the bike was hers and she knew that he had the phone there to scan the bike. I don't think it was right of her to do that because, and by the way, the light does come on after the whole phone situation. It was wrong of her to grab the phone. Absolutely.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
So then that means, in spite of the fact that she was so scared and she was a situation that was completely illogical for her to approach these men in this scenario, she can still do something escalatory like taking his personal property, not property that he's borrowing, not property that he's the authorized user on, his personal property, something as personal as his phone. I'm supposed to believe that a woman that felt comfortable enough to do that in that scenario did not feel comfortable approaching the young man in the first place, or didn't feel comfortable scanning the QR code. I don't know, bro. That sounds really logically inconsistent to me.
I don't think she's doing it because she's comfortable. I think she's doing it out of instinct. I think it's pretty obvious she's uncomfortable in this scenario.
Uncomfortable enough to grab his phone.
I mean,
That's a
she's
very aggressive
behaving
thing to
pretty
do.
erratically.
That was a very aggressive thing to do.
Yes, people make aggressive actions in defense.
Okay.
Even if we're to say she's the aggressor in this situation, it's very clearly a fight or flight mode she's in. And whether she's in flight or fight, it doesn't really matter. She's in that mode. She's not behaving.
So you would say that it was fight or flight when she took off her badge right there. She was cognizant at that point. That wasn't like her just acting out of instinct. That was her recognizing, making a cognizant decision. These boys are recording me and I want to hide my identity. You're saying that right there was just part of the fight or flight thing. That was not a cognizant thing of recognizing, wait, I still have to make sure that I protect my job and things like that. When she faked those tears, you're saying that was just still part of the fight or flight thing. There was no cognizance there for her to say, oh, now there's another person here. If I start pretending to cry, that this will amplify his wanting to help me in the situation, right? None of those things were fight or flight. I mean, all of those things were fight or flight too. None of those things were about her cognizantly realizing, man, I'm manipulating this situation.
I mean,
crazy.
She's obviously making decisions inside the video. I'm just saying, yes, like there's an instinctual element to the way that she's behaving, and I don't think she's walking through this scenario like some evil mastermind.
So
I just,
you're saying it was instinctual so the 3 things that I mentioned, the faking the tears when the man walked up, you're saying that was instinctual?
well, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
even if
And
you
then
wanted to
taking
say
the
it was
ID off,
white
that was
woman
instinctual?
tears, huh?
And taking the ID off, because she knew they were recording, that was instinctual. That wasn't
I don't know.
cognizant.
I don't know. I was gonna ask you to
I
play
think
it,
you
but
do know. Oh, you do. Oh, you don't remember it?
It's one thing people talked about, but I actually didn't catch it when I was watching the video.
Sure, I can show it to you really quickly. Give me half a second.
No, record it.
Pause. Let me
Does she? So she's got it at the very beginning.
Yeah, she does.
When
and
it
then
when did she?
takes it
Does
off.
she?
You see it?
She takes it off at the very
Here.
beginning.
No, it's about 20 seconds in. I want to say. Oh no.
Okay.
Let me see how far is this. Oh yeah, it's pretty early on actually. Here.
No, record it.
Help! Help me! Please help me!
Not your bike.
Please help me!
Not your bike. It's not your bike.
Please help me! Help! Please get off me!
Hey, what the fuck is going on,
Please get off me!
Yo, don't take it, bro. Now you're not getting the bike, bro.
13 seconds in, and she takes off her ID. You're saying that this is just part of her fight or flight? This is just instinct? Or do you think it was her cognizantly realizing these men are recording me, and so I want to hide my identity because she didn't want to lose her job that she deserves to lose?
No, I'll be honest. That just looks like she's putting away her badge.
Why did she put away her badge?
I don't know that there's even an intention there. I think it would be
So then that would
ridiculous.
be instinctual then. If there's no intention, she's just doing something, then that means it would just be instinctive. Or do you think she was doing it in order to hide her identity?
It's probably not instinct. It's probably routine because she's about to go riding, whether or not she gets that bike.
Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't imply that intentionality to her the same way that I'm not going to apply intentionality to the boys to say like I can't know whether or not they're taping for like a race bait situation, but I mean, it's possible. It's also possible they are in the right and they're just videotaping because they don't want to get got by this girl.
Escape and float into magenta sky. Away you fly. Return to dive into the sea of me. We're never free. Slow down, I'm waiting for the perfect time when you are mine. These soulful waters makes the fires burn. We got to learn. Love happens once without a second chance, a second glance. We're best together when our souls combine and love sublime. Bittersweet little white lies. Dark star on a bright night. Pain is rounded but time flies. The love's gone but it's alright. Escape to float into magenta skies. Away you fly. Return to dive into the sea of me. We're never free. Slow down, I'm waiting for the perfect time when you are mine. These soulful waters make the fires burn. We got to learn. Bittersweet little white lies. Dark star on a bright night. Pain is grounded but time flies.